Yeah, I think now it's
Is it?
yeah, I think now it's fine. Yeah, it's in Facebook. Yeah, yeah. Hi. I think it's working, Rishi.
It still is not popping up on the Facebook page. Uh,
All right.
just a
I'll
second.
wait for some time. You let me
Mm-hmm.
know. It's okay.
Yeah, it's on live. I can start.
Hi everyone. I'm saying this for the second time, so welcome again for the Saturday's live session on entrepreneurship, environment and farming, powered by Ajuri. My name is Sadiq Hassan. Again, so for this particular webinar, which is on sustainable living, we have Pranathi, who is an architect specializing in natural building with a focus on bamboo joinery and design. She worked at Abari, Nepal from 2014, collaborating with founder Nripal Adhikary, a published author on bamboo craft and architect. She completed her PDC in Nepal in 2019. In 2020, she received a writing fellowship to study permaculture farmers as a modern ethnic group. Praniti now dedicates her time to natural farming on her farm, Venuvana, where she hosts guests to experience sustainable living. She has a strong interest in food, herbalism, natural skincare, and nature-inspired art. Her vision including seed library to provide access to heirloom seed varieties native to India and Nepal. Once again, Vanity, thank you very much for joining us today. And I would just like you that if you could give us a brief idea about the things you have been working, that would be great.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the Anna Jury team and especially Jannat for coordinating and organizing this whole event, and for you for hosting it and your entire team. I'm very grateful to be here, and very happy to share my journey that has been over 10 years now. So what I want to share is that sustainability is still a very misunderstood word, and through lived experiences I've had the opportunity to navigate through it and iterate it and reiterate it, and that's how my journey has been, with a lot of um, busting myths that which are popular. So my journey started with architecture. I graduated in architecture, and then I had took a liking towards natural building. And you know how the saying goes, like, roti kapda makan. So the whole idea was, I have a foundation in architecture, so how do I build on that? So I started to explore like organic farming and studying things on those lines. And then slowly, when I had a little bit of time on hand, I was also exploring natural clothing. And so, it's been a slow and gradual process, but definitely a very creative and fun one. And I can't wait to share it with all of you. Thank you for attending, whoever's here. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining today. And we are looking forward to learn a lot of things, and specifically this area, which is hugely misunderstood by the masses. So firstly, I would actually like you to, let's set the motion in its own place. Right? I would say, how do you define sustainable living? Or what is sustainable living as a whole? And what inspired you follow this particular path?
For me personally, sustainability is about being in sync with nature, and being seasonal, because I think the one thing that's constant is that seasons come and go, and so sustainability is not a very rigid idea for me. It's something that changes, something that adapts, and it's strongly rooted in systems design. So it cannot be a one size fits all sort of a solution. It has to take into consideration the environment and so many other factors that are coming into play in the environment. So it's a very broad, definition, but I think it's very inclusive. So that's my definition of sustainability. And what inspired me is that, yeah, I really wanted to live closer to nature, I always saw my grandparents garden, for example. That's like my earliest memory of nature, having been exposed to nature in my own household. And that's a very vivid memory. And I really wanted to connect with it even as a professional going forward. And now I'm in a space where I can share that knowledge. So I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, my inspiration has been like, those moments of peace in nature, to be able to sustain that and make that longer. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds really amazing, and I think it's a kind of a I would say, in a way, it needs to come from within, where we actually find ourselves and a very intimate relationship with the nature, just like you mentioned. So, what are certain practices that you think can be defined as sustainable living? Or, like, in its own crux, if we say, if someone has to follow a sustainable living ideology or an idea, what can be followed in its own sense?
Like I said earlier, it's a very personal take, I think, to live sustainably. Depends on what values speak out for you, within the frame of sustainability.
Mm,
And for someone who wants to start, I would say recognize what you're already doing and then take small steps from there, rather than, absolutely disregarding what you have and then just chasing some ideal or idea that somebody else is subscribing to you. Because sometimes, sorry, all the time it's context specific. So maybe what somebody else is saying need not necessarily fit into your context. So I would say start very small. And for me, the journey started actually truly started in lockdown, when I had the time, to put seeds in the soil, basically. So that was my small start. And over the past 5 years, it's been um, self-taught, basically. And of course, there's so much information out there, but um, what you learn by doing is, I think, um, it's a lesson that you'll never forget. And I'm not for sharing a recipe for sustainability, but I'm just going to say that it's a very personal preference, and I would say reach out to people locally, so the ideas are more context specific, people who are doing the good work. And there's so many people these days. So yeah.
So, when actually, when we hear the word sustainability or sustainable living is right now the buzzword, and there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of information. So how do we filter the information and actually able to, figure out if these are the things that might work for me or her, or any person? Because a lot of times, even I face when I am planning to go, like if I wish to go to go towards a sustainable living module, what we do is we Google it, how to live sustainably, and you get this plethora of information in front of me, and from those information, how do I actually figure out if these are the things? But you already mentioned about local, people who have been working in this sector. So do you think is there could be any way that we filter out the information firstly from which is available on the internet, or maybe join an NGO or something like that?
So I would say let's start with an example of like just lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Could be clothing, could be like
Hmm.
the things that you buy. So a simple example would be buying something from a local craftsman.
Mhm.
First of all, the economy stays local. Secondly, like you're supporting someone, a real person and their livelihood. For me, all of these things are values that speak to me. So that's why I choose it, not just for the fact that it's made with, let's say, bamboo, or let's say
Mhm. Mhm.
rattan or cane weaving. There's so much of beautiful craft work in Northeast,
Yeah.
So I would say like that for me is the smallest and easiest switch, if I was from where you are, to
Mhm.
kind of just populate my house with
Yeah.
things made locally by the people with their hands. And that would just it's such a personal preference again. So that would be a small example, you know. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it does actually quite clicks me because I think what you are trying to say is that sustainability is a kind of the connection you find and the emotions being attached to any kind of thing. And I think when we are able to connect emotionally, we keep it longer, and it kind of
yeah,
reduces the carbon footprint as well. So I think,
absolutely. You
yeah,
maintain it, you know, because there's a
yeah,
story, there's a relation, there's
uh-huh.
an emotion, like you said. So I absolutely believe that, you know, that sustains the product. So
Hmm.
sustainability, the meaning is taken differently as well, you know. So it sustains longer
Hmm.
because of this connection.
Even I think the word sustainability is a very, of course, I mean, it has been in the buzzword for the time being. But if we notice from the lifestyle which my parents used to follow or our grandparents, I think that could be regarded as a true sustainable lifestyle because every time we see the old, any kind of clothing or any kind of, equipment or things which were made in the past, like, it still exists and it still holds that emotion. I think it has to do with it is not something new. It is already, we're just adopting the old practices again with a new word. It's very interesting to look by that way. So now I would actually like to come to an idea which comes into sustainability and farming as well is permaculture. So you have worked in permaculture for quite some time. So I would actually like to know about, like, what is permaculture firstly, and for an individual who has very little knowledge about this sector, which is permaculture, how can he maybe move to that direction or maybe learn about it more and incorporate the idea of permaculture in his or her own life?
I think like a quick introduction for someone who's new to the word is like it's pretty much an anti thesis to what monoculture is. So mono is like a single crop,
Mhm.
and perma is like multiple crops. So basically, like you're growing many different crops in one single piece of land,
Mhm.
and yes, it's like something that's been popularized recently
Yeah.
by the West, and in the past, let's say 50 years, there's a brilliant book written by Bill Mollison, and it was a whole movement. But all of it, I think, originates in our indigenous knowledge, in you know, all the traditional knowledge systems of farming. Wherever in the world you go, it
Mhm.
is permaculture. You know, they just didn't have this unifying word, but they all practiced this because everybody was looking at uh, biodiversity. People were looking at systems. People were looking at not just one crop for the market, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people were originally growing food for their own consumption. So
Mhm.
obviously they wanted diversity. And
Yeah.
what permaculture now preaches is all of those best practices, you know, inspired by traditional knowledge. It's
Mhm.
basically put into a beautiful format. And um, the course that I did really taught me how to design a system. And because I come from a design background, it really, I was able to pick up the concept a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so it helps you design whatever space. It could be your balcony, and it need not necessarily be farming also. Permaculture it includes a lifestyle basically. So
Mm.
it helps you design your space in a way where you you know, it is a systems thinking process again. So if you were to take a piece of land, permaculture would talk about zoning, and it's a very anthropocentric approach. So it really matters how you design the zones and how little effort humans can put into producing a very diverse output of like food or whatever you're trying to grow. It could be medicinal plants, it could be so many different things, herbs. So these are the precepts of permaculture, so to say, and some very distinct characteristics would be like companion planting, for example. So in
Yeah.
permaculture, they say like if you're planting something like a tomato, you would plant marigolds or something like basil, something with a very strong scent. So the
Hmm.
bugs don't attack the tomatoes. They actually
Hmm.
go for, or they're, kind of, they are not attracted to tomatoes because of this really strong scent.
Hmm.
So the idea is to plant things and design the planting system in such a way that you don't have to put too many inputs like
Yeah.
fertilizers or pesticides or things like that.
Hmm.
So that's the whole concept basically. And how would you apply it? It really depends. What are you applying it on your balcony? Are you applying it in a piece of land? Are you, looking at permaculture from an approach where you want to support a farmer and you're, like there's so many ways to apply it. So it really depends who is asking and for what purpose. Yeah.
I mean, this is a very interesting point where you've mentioned that permaculture is very inclusive in nature, where it can be applied to different spaces. Because when I hear, as far as I've read about permaculture, mostly it was, to my mind, I mean, I was wrong probably. It was a conception that it would be only applied in farms where it's in a natural place. Now, when you have mentioned about it, that this is not only a farm-centric approach, but there's a very inclusive nature. This is a very new thing for me. And yeah, so I mean, you also mentioned that you have certain photographs. So if you would help us
Yeah,
show some photographs as well.
absolutely. It's much better to speak with
Yeah, yeah, photographs.
yes. So hold on, let me share the
Sure,
screen.
sure.
And another thing is that the precepts of permaculture are
Mm-hmm.
earth care, people care, and fair share. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
apply those three things to a project, it would kind of it would be permaculture in its essence.
Okay. Mm.
So let me show you a few things.
Okay.
Maybe start with this. I just wanted to show you in lockdown, this is where I started.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like a small little
Huh.
patch. This is all I
Okay.
had, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in 5 years, like I'll show you the transformation of this small piece of land I had in
Mm-hmm.
the city. So now, I mean, I removed that little bed here because, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't working. So I kind of failed because that little patch was not the best thing that I did.
Okay.
And uh, I used like I had access to bamboo at that time, so I
Mm-hmm.
just made simple beds. I didn't use much fancy things, and
Mm-hmm.
this is how it was in the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, to be very
Mm-hmm.
honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like over the years,
Wow.
I've learned a lot. Like in the monsoon, you need this cover, and like instead of having these trellises, every
Mm-hmm.
year I set up like a semi-permanent trellis
Mm-hmm.
system using
Okay.
bamboo. So earlier it was like this, and
Mm-hmm.
now and then like I started to create raised beds because here there's
Mm-hmm.
frost. Like in winter it gets very cold,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
this prevents certain plants from dying because it's in
Mm-hmm.
raised beds. And now like it also has like this
Yeah.
trellis and cover system. So this is how it's transformed in the past 4 5 years. So this is where it is at the moment. um and what else? What else can I? Some farm strategies I wanted to show you.
Sure.
You know how you have like there are good bugs and bad bugs. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see here, there are aphids on the broccoli, sorry, kale, and there's also good bugs which come. This is what happens when you create systems design. So you will have pests, but then you also have these predators for the pests.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, like I don't know if you noticed the trellises.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with growing pumpkin in our weather. I don't know if you have problems growing pumpkins and squash there, but here it's necessary to have those kinds of trellises. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you can notice in this picture, but this is a very typical permaculture concept called Three Sisters. It's called
Mhm.
corn, bean, and squash. So the corn is like the natural pole around which the bean grows, and the
Mhm.
squash is like a natural, like leaf litter. So basically, it's adding fertility to the soil and mulching the soil as green mulch. So this is a typical corn, bean, squash demonstration.
All right.
And like I was saying about designing systems, it's like allowing for this biodiversity where, birds are coming, they're eating the worms, and
Mhm.
it took years to get here, but this was a short
Wow.
video where I was able to capture it. Um, yeah, this is just some flowers from the garden.
Mhm.
And once you've got a certain system going, you start
Mhm.
to,
Okay.
like there's so much that the garden gives you. It gives you things to eat. It gives you things as medicine. It gives you things as natural pigments, so you can color
Mhm.
things with it. And so I think it's like it was like a space for me to learn so much. So
Mhm.
this is just my little medicine cabinet uh, of flowers and leaves from.
Okay, medicine cabinet, you mean it's totally natural, and I mean any kind
Yeah,
of, okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
like this yellow thing is petals of calendula flower and some
Mhm.
marigold flower, and this is some leaves
Mhm.
which can be brewed into tea. So basically things from the garden, like flowers and leaves mostly, and some
Mhm.
roots as well, which, when you look at a plant and you just know it by its name, but even a plant has so many different parts like roots, stem, leaves, flowers. And
Mhm.
when you get into reading about it, so
Mhm.
many different things that you learn. I didn't know, like, for example, the dandelion root is medicine, or like the three leaf clover is also like used for so many things. So I just kept learning and learning, and I started to dry them and collect them. Um, it just became a separate hobby for me. Um, and yeah, this is just an example of like mulch, So there's
Mhm.
all this ground cover to help
Mhm.
retain the water, and then slowly these leaves decompose and also add value to the soil. So soil building is a very important activity in whether it's organic farming, natural farming, or
Mhm.
permaculture. So I just wanted to show you an example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is again like a clear example of permaculture. You have like so many things growing, this is passion fruit growing on a vine. This
Mhm.
is kale over here. This is like a papyrus ornamental plant. Lettuce is going to seed. Um, yeah, so there's a lot happening, and like for example, if a pest comes in, it's kind of confused, like where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it just becomes a small part of the system. It doesn't become a big
Mhm.
problem
Mhm.
like in
Yeah. Yeah.
monoculture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just going through some pictures here. It's the same scene, but as the season changes, the produce changes. Like earlier it was gladiolus, and now it's marigold is drying. In the background, there's garlic and onion drying. So yeah, it's like garden keeps you alive. Like, the seasons just show you, what's going on. And
Wow.
yeah, I'm sure you have this fruit. Do you? I don't know. This is called yellow raspberry. It's called
Okay.
iceberg. So maybe your
I
team
haven't
member
tried.
from Uttarakhand will know. Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a very Pahadi thing. So,
All right.
when you're connected to land like this, it just
Mhm.
gives you so many gifts. So,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe you can ask me more questions because
Sure,
otherwise
sure. I
I'm
mean,
just.
I'm really intrigued by the photographs, and I'm really interested because I'm a huge fan of gardening by myself, and I actually very much interested. So, what are these kind of plants that I've seen in this
So
particular?
this is like if you go into a permaculture garden, or you go into a garden where it's organic and lots of things are growing, you come back with like a medley of things. So here I have, celery and lettuce and cauliflower and leek. And, I have lot of exotic things here, but I also grow lot of native varieties as well. So this was in winter, so this is how it looks. And this
Oh,
is
wow.
this is the biggest pumpkin I've grown. This seed
Oh,
varieties
this is a
from,
pumpkin. Okay.
yeah, it's like a long pumpkin. So I got
Okay.
this seed variety from South India actually.
Hmm.
So your travel also becomes about visiting farms and seeing what other people are doing. And I absolutely enjoy collecting local seeds, especially from farmers. And there's just so much to learn, when you travel like that. This is another pumpkin variety. So, once I got into pumpkins, I just started to collect so many pumpkin seeds. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So you're
Um,
really obsessed with pumpkins, it seems.
yeah, and now recently visited Mexico, so a lot of
Hmm.
corn varieties also.
Wow.
Um,
So how do you actually, since you mentioned that you have recently visited to Mexico, so how do you bring those seeds? I mean, do you bring those seeds, or even if you're bringing those seeds, how do you make sure that it's are alive or rather it being preserved in a way that is actually working?
I don't know if I should be saying this, but I smuggled them in my suitcase. A lot of countries have um, rules about bringing seeds, but I make
Mhm,
sure that I buy from a local place, or it's usually in a sealed packet. So that's very important, especially when you're crossing international borders. Um, Other than that, seeds are meant to be dry, and it's basically like typically annuals. They are
mhm,
kept, for example, corn is an annual. That means you only grow it once a year, right?
mhm,
Or one season in a year. So it's kept like this, and it's dried, and then the seeds are stored, and only next year it will be planted. So when you
mhm,
transport them, they will be dry, and you just plant them when it's time to, you know, grow corn.
mhm,
So
mhm.
these are some ginger varieties that I had, blue ginger, mango ginger, and this is actually from Northeast. I forget the
Oh,
Lakadon, or I
all right.
forget the name, but
Mhm.
yeah, it just gets so interesting when you look at a plant and then you're like, what else is possible? And nature surprises you. It's just sometimes it's endless varieties.
Yeah,
And we are so
absolutely.
lucky that we are in Asia, and we are in such a fertile and biodiverse space that you're always finding new things to grow. Um, yeah, and my answer to anybody who wants to start growing things is just prepare for failure, because I did this process over and over and over again, like you just
Mm,
have to keep trying. I think a gardener is like a hopeless romantic. You have to not give up, basically, and then you see the signs, of your persistence. So that always brightens my day. Yeah, I got a little bit more systematic, as you can see. I started to
wow.
put
Mhm,
labels,
mhm.
and it's important to, write names
Yeah.
and things. So
Mhm.
yeah, this
Looks
is I'm
really
just sharing.
intriguing. Yeah, indeed. I mean, the this is the first time actually I'm seeing the live demonstrated, very well documented photographs. Otherwise, most of the time, we even had people who have talked about permaculture in here itself,
Uh-huh.
but it was
Mm-hmm.
mostly about, talking and not able to visualize it. But since
Mm-hmm.
you're showing us the photographs, it is able to make us understand how it actually happens. So this is more
Yeah.
intriguing now.
Thank
So
you.
I would also actually like to come to the another aspect now, which is green buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about green buildings, so how is it different from traditional form of buildings as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it and that would be great if you have photographs, then we can even understand better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I don't again, green is such a it's a word that's thrown around. So I'll just say natural building just to avoid
Okay.
any
Mm-hmm.
misunderstanding. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
natural building is something that uses context specific materials. For example, I'm sitting in this rammed earth room, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in Kathmandu, and
Mm-hmm.
Kathmandu is located at the edge of a hill. It's kind of a valley. So in 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 the edge of Kathmandu, you find all these hills ending, and that's where you find all the ingredients that's necessary to build a rammed earth wall, like big stones, small stones, clay, sand. Um, and when I say sand, not river sand, but like, particle matters, which are the size of sand. So all of these ingredients are taken and they're put into a formwork and they're rammed into place. So that's the kind of wall that this is. But
Mm-hmm.
natural building for me is, I think the closest example I could give is imagine skin having pores, right?
Yeah.
So a natural building has pores, and it is built in a way where the reaction is reversible. So if I break this wall down, it
Yeah.
will go back to being natural clay,
Mm-hmm.
earth, and sand and stone. But when you add cement, what happens is the pores are kind of frozen in a certain state because it's an irreversible reaction.
Yeah.
And the way that that skin breathes versus like a
Mm-hmm.
natural skin with pores breathing is very
Mm-hmm.
different. So in summer, for example, the solar passive design aspect kicks in, which is that inside of a naturally built home, we all have had access to this kind of a house. Maybe it could be our grandparents' house or
Yeah.
somewhere where we visited in the villages. It's cooler inside, right? In the summer,
Yeah.
it's warmer in the winter. So why? It's because it has pores,
Mm-hmm.
and it can breathe, and so it's constantly in touch with nature. So that for me defines what a natural building is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that would completely cover everything. Maybe I could
Yeah. Show some photographs.
share
Yeah.
some more
Yeah.
pictures with you, right?
Yeah. That would be great. I mean, that's the part of that's I was actually trying to mention or that point out is that how, the earlier generations that, our grandparents generations, we were actually practicing sustainable lifestyle, but it
Yeah.
wasn't quantified under a particular paradigm where we call it this particular word. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this
Wow.
is the house in Venuvana, in the farm
Mm-hmm.
that we host people in. This is the original building that we built. This is currently like the central building where we have the dining and kitchen and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
we have other buildings where we host guests now.
Mm-hmm.
So this was built using rammed earth, and this is a very typical Pahadi house design. So
Mm-hmm.
we kind of kept the proportions and
Mm-hmm.
just used rammed earth instead of bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And we used like these clay tiles are all second hand. We bought it from our neighbors,
Okay.
and the tiles, the house tiles, I don't know if you can see, they are
Mm-hmm.
made locally in the neighboring place called Bhaktapur. So as
Okay.
much as the wood that we used in the house is from a community forest. So Nepal has a lot of community forests still alive,
Mhm.
and you're able to source wood locally.
So
So everything.
what
Mhm.
what does a community forest looks like? Like, could you give a bit context about it?
Community forests are native forests, I would say. So they have
Mm-hmm.
pioneer crops, and it's wild. So nobody, like it's not like a national park or anything, but the community that lives around it has access to it and is traditionally it was responsible for its upkeep and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, nobody really, does anything there, but what they do is they harvest wood once in a few years.
Okay.
So community forest is also very important for biodiversity because it's a piece of land where nature is undisturbed. So our community forest has a stream, and there's so many birds, and it's completely covered in green. So
Okay.
it's also like a good source of native microbes when you have to make, like, for example, um, natural fertilizer. You collect the soil from this forest because it has all these microbes, right? And then you come and bring it to your compost pile, and then you multiply that microbial system. So yeah, we're very grateful that we have this community forest
Yeah.
close to us.
So another thing that I would like to ask you, since we are already, we're showing me the house, particularly where you guys host different
Mm-hmm.
guests. So could you give us a brief idea about this module? I think it's an ecotourism module which you guys are following. So
Yeah.
what exactly you guys are trying to do here, or what we are looking
So the whole concept is like I said, to be able to experience sustainable living, we wanted
at?
to be able to offer that to people who come here. So like here you can see there's this clear line with the neighbor's land who's doing kind of monoculture. It's like corn.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's like it's so different, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the experience of living here is something I just can't describe. You have to come and experience it yourself. So
Okay.
you're living in this natural house, and then you're around this wild forest. There's so many birds and insects, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're also picking the vegetables and fruits. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we wanted, the experience of it, to be able to live that
Mm-hmm.
idea of sustainability. So that's what we wanted to offer. So we've also, if you could see, we've demonstrated different building
Mm-hmm.
methodologies. Here it's compressed earth break. This is
Mm-hmm.
wattle and daub. The other house is rammed earth. We've
Mm-hmm.
used bamboo everywhere. So it's also like
Wow.
a place where we demonstrate and showcase our expertise, which is natural building.
Mm-hmm.
And like all the fabrics are like, locally sourced and cotton and simple, like
Mm-hmm.
no chemicals or anything like that. We also designed the furniture, and we've used local artisans, weaving around
Mm-hmm.
us, which I think it weaves a whole story of where you are. If you
Yeah.
wake
Yeah.
up here, okay, I'm here. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at such and such place. So the whole concept is for you to be kind of anchored to where you are, to be present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, these are just like showing you some pictures and videos.
So
Um,
another things that comes to my mind is that a lot of times when these kind of places we see these kind of places, the very common sensic question comes to my mind is that how do we coexist with the wild? For example, there are a lot of different bushes, different kind of plants. So there's a possibility there would be snakes as well, or different kinds of insects. So how do we coexist with them? Because a lot of people are scared about these things. So how do we maintain a balance between all of this?
so I don't know, like the kind of people who choose to come here are people who want to be in nature.
Mm.
So also I give a small like information, like send a message saying
Yeah, yeah.
that, be aware that you're in the presence of other creatures. It's
Mhm,
not just about us. It's also
mhm,
like they come. Many times I don't even have to say it, but I always
yeah.
do.
Mhm,
They're very well aware of the fact that, we are in nature amidst other
mhm,
creatures.
mhm,
So um, we've not had problems like that.
mhm.
Um, yeah,
Okay,
it's
sounds good.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah, this is also very beautiful.
yeah, some
Wow.
flowers. That's the view.
I can see a lot of bamboo. So these bamboos being locally sourced? I mean, from the native area itself? Okay.
It's sourced in Chitwan, where the factory is, where we treat the bamboo using borax, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a non-toxic salt.
Mm-hmm.
So the treatment happens there, and we bring the treated bamboo, and we use that in construction. So Chitwan is about, let's say, 150 kilometers from Kathmandu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So also a question comes to my mind is that there's a lot of, you know, mm, skepticism in the idea that tree structure doesn't really last for long. So is it true, or is it just a myth in its own self?
I mean, it's true that bamboo can decay, but that's because it's not been treated right. So
Okay.
treatment is such an essential part of using it as a building material or using it for furniture or anything that's long lasting.
Mm-hmm.
So just like wood needs treatment,
Mm-hmm.
bamboo also needs treatment. Wood is like not fumigated, but there's hot and cold treatments, there's like steam treatments, there's so many different methods with which wood is treated. So similarly, bamboo is also treated, and it lasts as long as wood when it's treated properly. So
Okay.
yeah, this is one of the
Beautiful.
bathrooms. So everything up to the last detail, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the mirror frame and everything is made with bamboo. And this is like an outdoor dining area that we have. So
Mm-hmm.
even here, originally we didn't have a roof. Now there is a
Mm-hmm.
roof. The idea was to just sit under a tree and eat.
Wow.
So
Just like Newton.
it's becoming more and more rare, right? That we
Yeah.
have this kind of access to,
Wow.
and we always try to source everything from the garden, like so
Mm-hmm.
colorful, and people love the experience of,
Wow.
watching their food be harvested
Mm.
and cooked and served. So I think
So
that's the highlight for a lot of
uh,
people.
another question is that the biggest contributor to maybe I would say environmental degradation is comes from consumables. For example, a lot of consumables in the market that we buy from is actually, has a very lasting impact in terms of carbon footprint or maybe on the environment as a whole. So how do you manage that part of it? I mean, do you guys, when there's a food to be prepared, do you actually look into it as a, thing which is available in the garden itself, or, how to source it locally as well?
So most of the vegetables and fruits we
Mm-hmm.
source locally. We are in a village amidst farmers. So whatever is in season, we also grow a lot of things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we try to get most of it from the village.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we know a lot of permaculture practitioners. We also know organic farmers because we are part of those forums.
Mm-hmm.
So we know where we are buying from. We're very particular about giving the guest a full experience. So we want to make
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
that whatever they're trying is like local and seasonal and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And many times we also tell them the background or the story of who it's where it's coming from, and that's
Yeah.
such it literally lights up their face to know that factor. So we're also very happy to be able to do that for them. um yeah, these are some spaces. We also have like this like a multi-purpose space, but mostly for yoga and like sound healing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
um
Nice. Beautiful.
yeah, this is the gate also
Wow.
designed with bamboo.
Mhm.
So yeah, each room is a different experience. Every space, every corner, every furniture is like, something new. So what else? What do we have here? This is one of the windows.
Mhm.
We use some local stones to build a wall. We
Right.
built a small pizza oven
Oh,
using
nice.
cob.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, building according to the landscape. And
Yeah.
the biggest for us, the biggest feedback or marker
Mhm.
is to see the diversity that we are able to see. That shows
Mhm.
that we're doing something right, where we
Mhm.
see
Wow.
so many
Mhm.
different kinds of creatures come and inhabit the space.
Mhm.
And it's always colorful, it's always beautiful. Every season is so different. This is the community forest I wanted to show
Mhm.
you. So it's
Beautiful.
so dense and wild, and this is I
Mhm.
think the source of energy around us,
Mhm.
of all the elements. So
Mhm.
um,
So, Just the last photograph that you have just showed me, is it a rooftop garden?
Yeah, this I was going to show it, like the first few photos I showed you of the
Mm-hmm.
transformation, that's in
Yeah.
Kathmandu. And what
Okay.
happened over the years is I convinced my neighbor also to start a
Ah.
terrace garden. So we built them this terrace roof. So
Uh-huh.
uh, it was so important and interesting for me that, I could have them on board, because sometimes what I do is I plant a few seeds here, I plant a few seeds in the farm and a few seeds in the terrace garden, right?
Yeah.
So I'm also increasing my chances of succeeding, because
Right.
whatever doesn't work in my place sometimes works
Right.
here or sometimes
Yeah.
works in the farm. So
Mm.
I think it's like, it was just like as a joke I put it up here, but since you asked,
Yeah,
that's
it is intriguing in the sense because this shows that it can be done in urban spaces like in
yeah.
rooftop areas.
Yeah, and this
Because
doesn't
this
have to be a bamboo roof. It can be
Mhm.
any roof.
Yeah,
Uh,
because
but here
there's a
we have
concern.
monsoon, so we needed the
Mhm.
roof. But maybe depending
Mhm.
on where you are,
Mhm.
you can design the space. So this is what I mean by design, like
Mhm.
how would the roof be, or how are you going to keep the plants? What kind of support do the plants need? All these
Mhm.
factors come into the design aspect of it. Yeah, and for example, at the farm, we have so much,
Mhm.
horizontal land, right? So
Mhm.
we built the again raised beds because sometimes there's frost temperatures. But
Mhm.
so the good thing about using the bamboo here is that this one is not treated. So over the
Mhm.
years, slowly it'll decompose, and we want that in the garden because we want it to
Mhm.
add to the soil. So
Right.
in a
Right.
few years, it will be replaced, but it will be leaving the
Mhm.
soil in a better condition.
So in a way, it's a oasis in its own self, where we
Yeah,
have the
the whole point is for it to be self-sustaining, you know.
yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, and I think one thing that you asked was how can it be applied in urban spaces, for example,
Yeah.
natural building. I just wanted to show you with some pictures that
Mhm.
this was a small project I did with somebody in Nepal, where we just went, to a close by. Here there are forests, but maybe you could go somewhere where you could access clay.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
just went around collecting different kinds of clay and we
Mhm.
brought it back home. So we found an ant hill also.
Wow.
Ant hill is wonderful for like red clay. I mean, it was already broken. We didn't break it,
Yeah.
but it's a wonderful source of red clay. So we
Mhm.
went back home with all these different colors of clay, right?
Mhm.
And this lady, she has a concrete house and she was complaining. And I said, let's try something. And we went, we got the clay. We basically just powdered it, or rather what do you call this in your language? But winnowed it.
Harmony.
Huh. And we
Mhm.
got the fine powder
Mhm.
out, separated. And we
Mhm.
made a simple paste of atta and water. It's like
Okay.
a natural glue.
Mhm.
And then we mixed the clay with it and we
Mhm.
started applying on her. We started to test it on her water tank first, just
Okay.
so we don't ruin her house.
Mhm.
So, we tested all these different colors of clay and, we were
Yeah.
surprised that it was free. Everything was free, pretty much came
Mhm.
from her garden and her kitchen.
Mhm.
We were able to develop these beautiful mud colors.
Wow.
And I think this is a small uh, thing you could do even if you have concrete walls. You can obviously get very creative. You can paint, you can do so many things with this pigment, right? So this was a
Mhm.
small project, and this is a small way to incorporate it into your life,
Yeah.
if that's what you're trying to do.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah.
So
Many people use cow dung also, but I think this
uh,
is a simpler and
easier process.
yeah,
Mhm. So the question that another question that comes to mind is that I think it is very much evident that you mentioned it's that there's a lot of failures that comes into this process. So how do you actually cope with this? Because a lot of times people just give it up. And I mean, like, the patience is the key, I understand. And secondly, all these information are there any kind of source where we can learn about it? So, it is accessible to other people as well.
In that sense, I personally am very old school, so I prefer to do a course or, like
Okay.
hands-on specifically if I can. But what I learned as I went about doing this is that
Mm-hmm.
I went to practitioners, I went to people who do it for a living. For example,
Mm-hmm.
my whole reason for working here is that I wanted to do it full time. I didn't want to do natural building as just a workshop. So, but it started with a workshop. I took a workshop in Ladakh, actually, in Sek Mall.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got to know about natural building, and I was like, hey, I looked up practitioners, I got in touch with them. So that was how I went about it, looking at the best practices, reaching out, maybe visiting them, maybe
Mm-hmm.
asking them for a job. I don't know.
Yes.
But yeah, like for me, farming, I didn't know anything about it. So
Yeah.
I did the course, the permaculture course.
Yeah.
But everybody has different modalities of learning. Like
Mm-hmm.
my partner, for example, he likes to read about it, and he just read about it and he was already doing it. So for
Wow.
me, it was important to do it with my hands at a
Mm-hmm.
course or with the practitioner, and then
Mm-hmm.
be like, okay, I can do this. So yeah. And I think it's important to fail because I wouldn't learn otherwise.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and this has been a very eye-opening and intriguing session, specifically when we actually demonstrated us using those photographs, because that was more impactful. And so what I wish to know right now is that, since you guys are actually working on this particular farm known as Venuvana, so where do you see Venuvana going? I mean, what is the plans for Venuvana and in upcoming years? And another question is that there is a huge wave going on right now in terms of sustainable living, green buildings, or maybe nature buildings, all those things. So where do you see this particular wave going? Will we be able to achieve that, or are we still far away from it? And in that case, you know, how can we adopt it as a whole from very small practices, from changes in our day-to-day lives?
Where do I see it going? I don't know about the whole wave, but what I know is that uh, every year I'm meeting more people who have started their journey or who have come to a certain place in their journey.
Mhm.
And what I see is that, people are making time in their everyday life, which is the
Yeah, yeah.
biggest thing, to try these things out, to
Mhm.
educate themselves about this. And so I think that's a really great marker. Um, Other than that, what I personally see is that um, more collaboration, I would say. Like, I think it would be so beautiful. Like recently, I visited a farm. I usually, when I go to South India, which is where I'm originally from, I try to visit farms. So this year, I was so lucky to host somebody who came from one of the places where I visited. So
Mhm.
this cross-pollination, collaboration, exchange of like everything, seeds, knowledge, recipes,
Mhm.
life stories, everything adds more value
Mhm.
to my place as well as their place as well as everybody we interact with. And I think to be able to open it up for more like let's say open field visits, so
Yeah.
curious people can come and do a day visit, for example, or do like a Q&A thing. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Mhm. Absolutely. This sounds really interesting because it's a kind of a barter system in its own self where
Yeah.
we are exchanging knowledge, different cultures, traditions. Well, I think it this summarizes everything that we wish to talk about today. And it was very interesting and intriguing at the same time. So, lastly, I was also thinking, this is a question that comes to my mind. This is a kind of I would say, a movement which is going, where we are trying to, educate people in this particular sector. So, do you think government can also play a role where they can actually help us to, implement certain perspectives on green living? Because right now the COP is happening in Azerbaijan. They're also trying to come up with different perspectives or different memorandums on different climate change issues. So, do you think locally, maybe not even government level, maybe in the municipal level or even the panchayat level, we can do something that can help us to adopt these ideas much better way?
I think the fastest and surefire way to approach it is to bring more people with indigenous knowledge and like
Mm,
traditional knowledge on board, because I
mhm,
feel like um yeah, policies can be made and things can be set in place, but like what is the value you're bringing to this change, for
mhm.
me that's what's important. And so it's so important to link ourselves to our past.
Yeah.
And traditional knowledge is just like, unfortunately it's not documented well,
Mm,
but we still, in Asia, in South Asia, we still have
yeah.
access to it. So I feel like
Mhm.
connecting that with like whatever is the new trending hip goal and
Yes,
policy.
yes,
I don't know, it changes
yes,
every few years. It's
yes, yes,
kind of like a garden, every few seasons something changes. But I think that link, that bridge to these people who practice and live that traditional knowledge, I think
yes,
that is
yes.
missing. Even for me, like if I were to tell you stories that I learned from this lady whose house I was at, who,
Mhm,
I shared the pigments session with. She has so much knowledge about farming, and I couldn't learn it in a course. You know what I mean?
mm,
So,
mm,
if we were able to bridge that, I
mhm.
think it would just go to the next level.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
would require much less external funds or external
yeah.
inputs, because we would have our own currency, we would have our own seed bank, for example, seed library. We would
Mhm,
depend less and less on the outside.
mhm.
So that would be a whole different story. So that's
So,
my wish, actually.
you just mentioned about seed bank, and even in the introduction, you also wrote about it. So, could you? So, are you working on a seed bank right now, where you are preserving the seeds?
I have a personal seed box.
Okay.
But I think that's a good start. And every year I see that it grows a little bit bigger and bigger. And my wish is for it to be open source, for it to
Mm,
be big enough and um, abundant enough that, whoever's interested in doing this seriously, of course,
yes, yes.
that they have access to it and that we could grow it from where it is now.
Mm,
And I'm really open to people who are interested to collaborate and
yeah.
really even do it remotely. Like, if you're
Mm,
interested, I could share my knowledge and you could have your seed
mm.
bank there, which I would
Oh.
love to visit. Um,
Mhm,
so yeah, a seed bank is basically like where the kind that I'm talking about is all organic, native heirloom
mhm,
varieties of seeds, which many of which are being lost. So
yeah.
I wish for those to be grown over a few years, so we could, have like an abundance of it for it to be shared around. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pranati. And I mean, it was a very amazing session. I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot of things. And I hope, I mean, now you have actually inspired me a lot to try permaculture in my own personal life, and I'll try to, adapt that slowly and gradually. And maybe someday we can exchange seeds in the future. Fingers crossed. And lastly, is that what kind of message that you'd like to leave today from to the audience who is maybe watching today, or maybe the repeated version which will be posted in Facebook? So anything, the closing remarks you would like to give.
Wow. I think everything is a seed, So every thought is a seed, every action is a seed. So I
Yeah.
would say choose your seeds wisely,
Okay.
because that's what grows, and you end up with a fruit of what you sowed. So it's really important to be aware of those things. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that.
Okay, yeah, that's a really beautiful remark. Thank you very much, and I hope to meet you in person someday and actually exchange our thoughts. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
so much for organizing this, and I'm very grateful to all of you, your entire team, and everybody who is watching. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're all very welcome.
Okay, see ya.
See
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.